Hello, everybody, and welcome into this very special edition of the Marlows matchup. We're live at one of our favorite places to be. Now, we always like it when we get a chance to be at various taverns throughout the metro Atlanta area, but here, the Marlows in Brookhaven has always been a special spot for us, a home away from home, if you will, and a great chance to be together tonight to talk some Georgia Bulldogs football as the Dogs get ready to take on Auburn on Saturday. There is a reason, after all, we call this the Marlows matchup. We'll be diving into all the important details for that matchup here tonight. I'm happy to be joined, as always, on our Marlows matchup with the former Georgia offensive lineman, UGA All-American John Stinchcomb. John, you and I had a chance to talk about this on Dog Nation. Yeah, absolutely. How about a big hand for John? Absolutely. You and I had a chance to talk about this on Dog Nation Daily this week. We've talked about this on Marlows matchups now for quite a while, that a lot of the season for Georgia was going to come down to this game. We could have said that in June and July, and in fact, we probably did. And here we are, like so many seasons of Georgia's past, Jordan-Hare Stadium, Deep South's oldest rivalry, and kind of everything's at stake. It doesn't make the game easier to win, but it certainly feels appropriate to be in this spot, does it not?
Well, this is the matchup that we had talked about the whole time, that November was going to be a big month for Georgia. When we did the Own the East series, it was you got to win in November. They had a big contest a couple weeks ago against Florida, and now it's Auburn. It's always Auburn this time of year, and there's not a more important game as the season goes than this one, especially is in the conversation for the college football playoffs.
Now, obviously, we're going to hear a lot of John's thoughts tonight in terms of what goes down with Georgia and Auburn. For those lucky enough to be here with us tonight, the Marlows in Brookhaven, they're going to get a chance to be a part of a special Q&A that we'll do after our broadcast is done and kind of dive into this a little bit more and give some unfettered thoughts about what really is going on with the UGA and what we really expect to happen against Auburn. It's one of the reasons why, if you have a chance to be a part of a Marlows matchup broadcast, you definitely want a chance to be able to do that. Also, if you watch us do the show and you're seeing us here at Marlo's and you've never been to a Marlo's Tavern near you, my advice would be that this is a great time of year to make sure you get out and see one, because Marlo's has just unveiled a new menu. You know, here at the location where we are right now, the tavern right here in the Brookhaven neighborhood, they've got brie fondue tonight. They've got turkey meatloaf. You know, it's an example of the chef-inspired food for really what Marlo's is famous for. This time of year especially, it's kind of cold outside tonight. To get cozy in here, nice, warm, cozy dining area, beautiful facility, and enjoy some turkey meatloaf, something like that. Always a great choice. Also, plenty of great cocktails flowing. When you're starting to think about holiday parties and things like that, the Marlo's Tavern closest to you is certainly a great choice for all of that as well. Now, I welcomed a special guest here a moment ago, John Stinchcomb. Let me also welcome another special guest as well. And let me just say, I am nothing if not someone who aims to please. I got a message on Twitter a little earlier. John Benton, one of our great commenters on our Dog Nation Daily broadcast, he said, B.A., would it be possible for Eddie the Blind Squirrel, the unofficial Dog Nation Daily mascot, to make an appearance at Marlo's in Brookhaven? This is unheard of. This is unprecedented. We are breaking new ground tonight at the Marlo's Tavern because Eddie has never been to a Marlo's before. But Eddie is here tonight, the unofficial mascot. He is here. He is feeling good about the fact that Georgia reigns supreme. 1,111 days, 1-1, 1-1. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. Eddie celebrates that every single day on Dog Nation Daily, and he is here today to do that. So, John, I apologize that you have to share the dais, if you will, with another special guest, but Eddie is quite special.
Well, I take it as a huge honor to be with Eddie, especially 1,111 days. That's a great number. That's pretty cool.
That is a great number, and of course, Georgia looks to keep its streak against Auburn going here as well, having won the last two, look to win 3 in a row, and of course, it'll end up being 4 of the last 5 for Kirby against Gus Malzahn and the Auburn Tigers. We'll take a lot of your comments on Facebook and YouTube about that, and I guess, John, what I kind of wanted us to do, if you don't mind, is just kind of zero in on some of the key factors that I think are important in this game for Saturday. Let me start with this. Georgia has not played well in hostile road environments. Now, it's kind of a weird thing in that Georgia doesn't really play in a lot of hostile road environments. And I'm not trying to be funny here, I'm being serious. Georgia took over Notre Dame in 2017. There weren't enough Irish fans in the building to make a lot of noise. In 2017 at Knoxville, Georgia knocked Tennessee out of the game so quickly, interception the first play from scrimmage. that stadium was essentially empty in the second half, that didn't get a chance to really get going. Obviously, Jacksonville's the neutral site. You split that stadium in half. It doesn't feel like a true road environment. However, last year at LSU did feel like a true road environment. Georgia didn't play well there. 2017, November in Auburn, Jordan-Hare, Georgia didn't play well there either. So as a guy that knows what hostile road environments are like at the NFL level, at the college level, a guy that got one of the biggest wins in recent Georgia history at Jordan-Hare Stadium back in 2002, tell me about road environments. Tell me about being ready to play. Tell me about what a team like Georgia's doing right now beyond just turning up the loudspeakers during practice to be ready for what they're going to experience.
Well, it's emotional, first and foremost. You're in an environment where people are booing you, and there's plenty of comments, and you go into the game with expectations. You want to perform well. You want to silence the crowd early, and sometimes emotions get the best of you. I think you saw a little bit of that in the Alabama-LSU game, where LSU was able to control those emotions, and controlled emotion is passion. Passion's a great thing. You want to play with passion. When you let that get out of whack, all of a sudden you're pressing too hard, you're forced into mistakes, and the game slips a little bit early on, and then you play in the scrambling the rest of the time. So Jordan-Hare is a difficult place to play. They can be very loud. They're engaged fans, and it's a big rivalry. So for Georgia to go into the game, control their emotions, and play with passion, all of a sudden you're back to playing in an environment that you're comfortable in, which is X's and O's and playing football.
The odd thing, and the odd thing about that is if you go back and look at the 2017 game, Georgia started the game exactly the way that you want to start a game. They marched right down the field and scored. I remember sitting in Jordan-Hare Stadium that day saying, wow, maybe this is going to be a little easier than I thought it was going to be, because you can't start a game better than that. And yet what happens beyond that? Well, all of a sudden Auburn starts putting a couple plays together, and I'm not necessarily a big believer in the concept of momentum in sports. I think sometimes people that do what I do for a living, speaking to microphones, have a tendency to overstate the idea of momentum as a concept. But I do believe that fans believe in it. And when fans see Auburn, after Georgia's touchdown, make a play on defense, put Georgia in 3rd and long, get a chance to pass rush on Fromm, put their own scoring drive together, all of a sudden momentum, whether it's real on the field or not, we can debate that. Real inside the stadium, it definitely did become that. And I think that's one of the keys, and you kind of touched on this a moment ago, is that it's more than just starting fast. It's playing consistently well enough throughout the game that Auburn doesn't put back-to-back big plays together, and all of a sudden now this crowd's standing up and everybody's cheering and everybody's making a lot of noise. The Auburn crowd's been weird this season in that after the Ole Miss game, which is Auburn's most recent game, there were some complaints from some of the players saying, hey, this place hasn't been as loud as it has been before. But up to this point in time, Iron Bowl's still looming. This is the biggest home game Auburn's played to date. I have no doubt their crowd is going to be ready to make an impact. If you're Georgia, you've got to be ready to respond to that, don't you?
Yes, I think the Auburn fans might be a little disenchanted. I mean, they've had a couple losses that have eliminated them from the national conversation. And when you're a team like Georgia, that's the expectation. So when there's more on the line, obviously the fans are more engaged. I think the Georgia fans at home these past 3 years have been the best I've ever seen. And there was a period of time where I can't say that has been the case. I think a lot of fans for a number of years had gone to enjoy a game. They want to see Georgia win, but they haven't been as fervent and feverish as they have in recent history. I think when you get in a big game like this for Auburn and Georgia, you don't have those same concerns. The fan participation is, I fully expect them to be very engaged and it to be a hostile environment unless it slips away, and I just don't think the game plays out like that.
We're going to take a lot of your comments here on both Facebook and YouTube. We're live tonight at the Marlow's Tavern in Brookhaven. We're actually going to be here till 8 p.m., so if you're in the Atlanta area, you want to stop by and see us, I'd encourage you to do that. Or if you are in the Atlanta area, can't be here tonight, but watching us on video, check out a Marlow's Tavern near you. Take advantage of the great new fall menu, enjoy the great cocktails. This is just a wonderful restaurant to be in for holiday gatherings, business lunches, whatever you have going on this time of year. Marlo's Tavern and the chef-inspired food, a really great choice for whatever you got going on as we head towards the end of the year here coming up. All right, a few of your YouTube comments, then we'll do some Facebook stuff after that. Jethro Smith says, after the 7-0 start in 2017, Jethro comes back and says, yeah, but if Georgia gets up 14-0, that crowd's going to die quicker than a mosquito in winter. And Yeah, I mean, that would obviously be very nice to turn what would have been a 7-0 deficit into a 14-0 deficit, to not only get off to a fast start, but then keep your foot on the gas after that start. I think that's a pretty good idea. Caleb Hurto also brings up George Pickens, saying, I hope they let Pickens start in this game. That would certainly be a measure of poetic justice, may not be the right phrase, but given the fact that Pickens had been a long-time Auburn commit, went to Hoover High School there in suburban Birmingham, obviously Auburn fans are going to notice when Pickens on the field. He was huge last week against Missouri. Whether he starts or not on Saturday, hard to imagine a Georgia win that Pickens doesn't factor significantly in.
He's going to be a factor. I mean, the guy has continued to make plays, and he made a name for himself this past Saturday as a possible, if not replacement for Cager, a complement for Cager, which this Georgia offense needs. I think they fill somewhat similar roles in that they're tall field stretchers down the end, down the edges. They don't mind going up and battling for a 50-50 ball on a go route, that you have the sideline, you have a cornerback. They seem to come down with that ball. So I think they play a little bit of complementary roles, but to have both on the field at the same time, the defense has to be aware that there are two dynamic playmakers that Georgia has utilized in these past few weeks. I think George Pickens is a guy that's starting to come into his own and was given an opportunity and maximized it, and has proven that you give him a few more of those opportunities and he's going to make you look good.
All right, so we're talking about the factors needed for Georgia to win the game against Auburn on Saturday. It's our Marlo's matchup live for the Marlos in Brookhaven. We mentioned the notion of overcoming a hostile environment and kind of doing what maybe Georgia hasn't done as well in the past, of really handling that moment well. RxDog98 on YouTube also brings up the freshman quarterback for Auburn, Bo Nix. I've said it a lot this week that I wouldn't be so quick to assume that Nix is just going to give the game away the way that he may have against Florida, where he had the interceptions. And we've seen Nix not necessarily play well in road environments this year against good teams. But to RX's point, doing something to disrupt the passing game for Auburn, making them one-dimensional, which, like any team, makes them easier to stop, I think that's important. And, John, I'll take it a step further. I think it's critical that Jake Fromm, a junior quarterback who's played in a million big games before, been in this stadium before, beaten Auburn in an SEC championship game, you can't have more big game experience through going on 3 years than Fromm has right now. I think it's critical that Fromm not just outplay Nix on Saturday. I believe he needs to significantly outplay him. Not to say that Georgia's offensive game plan is supposed to be a shootout, but it's going to have to throw it some. And when it does, he's got to be the better guy, and it's got to be obvious and it's got to be clear. I think there's an extra spotlight on Fromm on this game on Saturday. I think Georgia fans ought to relish that, just given the fact that he's done this so many times before. But I think Fromm is going to outplay his counterpart on the other sideline.
Well, I think that the way it's framed is more of a media sensation kind of thing. It's never a quarterback versus quarterback. I think at the end of the day, what you're looking for is better numbers from Fromm. That means the offense is being more productive. We need to see more from Georgia's offense, especially in the passing game, than what we've seen recently. I think Bo Nix is what you'd expect from a young, very talented quarterback. The guy's got all the skills in the world, but sometimes the game has been a little bit bigger than him. They get behind, he gets rattled. That's what you expect from freshman quarterbacks in the SEC of Bo's caliber. I mean, he's got the skills, but he can be affected. I think those big game moments have proven that. So hopefully what you want to do is affect him early in this game, get him concentrated on where's the pass rush coming from. Do I need to press a little more? You can force those kind of mistakes from a younger quarterback. I don't see that same thing happening for Jake Fromm. He's been in those big game moments and has excelled.
So Jermaine Dunbar in our YouTube comment section also brings up something that you and I were talking about before the show began, which is the fact that one of the things that's missing from Georgia, you can harp on the passing game, what it has been, what it hasn't been, but beyond that, and Kirby Smart has been very candid about this as well, the absence of what we're kind of used to seeing from Georgia, these 20-plus yard runs, these big rips where a hole opens up and all of a sudden the guy is just like, a lot of times it'd be DeAndre Swift, but just flying down the field. And when you look at the overall stats, I'm kind of a geek about stuff like this. I pay attention to this. On balance, the Georgia offensive line is actually probably still the best in the country. They are fourth in America in terms of percentages of passing plays that have resulted in sacks. They're eighth in America in terms of what we think of as line yards, which are those first 4 yards you can get. on any running back carry. So the hole is there. The opportunity to get those first 4 yards has been there, statistically speaking anyway, but the 4-yard run hasn't become the 10-yard run. The 10-yard run hasn't become the 15-yard run and beyond. What's that about to you? And I realize the answer to this question is complicated because is it the way the talent's being deployed? Is it a schematic thing? Is downfield blocking an issue? It's a hard question to necessarily answer, but I am curious of what your answer would be.
Well, my answer is I don't think Georgia has done enough to keep a defense honest, candidly. I think what we've seen is defenses sell out to stop the run. You hear Kirby early in the week say that's not a position they want Georgia's defense to be in, where they can oversell to stop one aspect of Auburn's offensive attack. Well, other defenses have given that to Georgia. You look at the Missouri game, I've never seen a game where a defense runs more bare, which is cover up every lineman, bring in the safeties at 9 yards. I mean, they're not at 15. They're not playing too deep. They're saying we are selling out to stop Georgia's run. That will limit your big plays, and I think that's a factor. We've run into defensive fronts that other teams would probably check into pass plays. Whether that's smart or not, I'm not sure. But I think because you've had special talent and DeAndre Swift in the backfield that Georgia has, they're willing to run into defenses that most teams would be like check into other plays, especially in 11 personnel. But you look at that one breakout run that DeAndre had, there are 2 defenders right there, a linebacker and a safety. He makes miss and takes it an extra 30 yards just because he's better than them.
So I wrote about this week at DogNation.com, and I'm curious to get your opinion. To me, based on everything you just described, and I think you've done a really good job of kind of laying out what the defenses that Georgia's facing looks like. To me, I think if you're Georgia, then you want to turn around and make that a mismatch of, well, if you've got bigger, slower guys in the game, if your front seven's made up of guys that can't run particularly well, then more opportunities to throw to DeAndre Swift would seem to be a great way to say, okay, maybe we can kind of kickstart the big play for number 7, not with a 20-yard run, but with something to the outside, a short pass where he's trying to make a guy miss in the first tackle and turn that into something. I mean, I was looking at some of the numbers, and I wrote about this. He's got 15 catches this year, had 32 a year ago. He was Georgia's leading returning receiver for the season, but of the 15 catches he has this season, 5 of those have gone for a yard or less. So, you know, it seems like in terms of your most dynamic playmaker offensively, which is what I believe that Swift is now, finding a way to get him more touches. He only had 12 carries last week against Missouri for some of the reasons that you mentioned before. So therefore, involve him more in the passing game, because one way or another, in open space, I don't know that anyone's more capable of, figuratively speaking, breaking ankles than what DeAndre Swift is with the ball in his hand.
Yeah, and every defense across the SEC and probably the country knows that. So they key on DeAndre Swift. They know that Georgia's a run-first offense, and they know how scary DeAndre can be when the ball's in his hands. I remember 2 plays specifically against Missouri that are timing routes and designed to get the running back out in space, either a flare route or a quick angle route that was affected by the snap. And the injury to Trey Hill early on, Cade comes in, later Sawyer comes in, and it looks like, you know, Fromm's fumbling with the ball. Well, on a timing route, that matters. And when you're looking to get the ball, get it to your running back out in space quickly, and all of a sudden you're more concerned about securing the ball before you can get it to him, that's a broken play from the jump. So having a simple center quarterback exchange has affected those plays. But I agree, the more ways you can get the ball in the hands of DeAndre Swift, he's the most dynamic playmaker Georgia has, period. And arguably in the SEC, that guy that every defense knows he can take it to the house and make you look silly every time he touches the ball.
Joseph Alexander, watching on Facebook, goes to the other side of the ball for a moment. He says, what's Auburn's offensive game plan going to be against the Georgia defense? And I thought that Kirby Smart was pretty candid about that as well this week, talking about those 3 keys you have on every single play. You have the quarterback who's snapping the ball. You've obviously got a running back to pay attention to, and Jartavius Whitlow expected to be back healthy here for this game. And you've got one more thing to read as well. And for Gus Malzahn, that's typically one of those wide receivers running one of those, jet sweeps. Malzahn likes to battle you horizontally. Am I using that word correctly? Horizontally? Yeah, horizontally as a way of opening up things vertically, especially with a running game up the middle. And that's one of the reasons why I think that the Auburn offense can be tough to stop. I know that Auburn fans actually are kind of bored with Malzahn's offense. They don't like the fact that he never made a quarterback switch this year when Nix was really struggling. And I understand where that's coming from because obviously the results kind of speak for themselves, or in this case, maybe the lack of results speak for themselves a bit. But in terms of what Georgia has to deal with, I actually think that the way that Malzahn calls plays is a challenge for Georgia here because we saw this in the 2017 loss. When Malzahn gets that stuff going side to side, all of a sudden, back then it was Kerryon Johnson up the middle. It'll be Whitlow, at least in large measure, up the middle on Saturday. That becomes really difficult to deal with. It remains to be seen if Bo Nix is going to be able to involve the wide receivers in the vertical threat situation. But in terms of what Malzahn does, staying committed to the run and using your need to defend the full 53 yards worth of width, all of a sudden that can soften up the middle from time to time, which even though the stats for the Auburn offense haven't been great, I do think that's a concern for Georgia on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think that kind of speaks into Georgia's strength. Their ability to stop the run has been impressive. I mean, they still haven't allowed a rushing touchdown. Correct me if I'm wrong. All season long, that is incredible. I think our corners have done a really good job in man situation, and you see a lot more freshmen contributing now, but Auburn's offense can present problems because they do. They stretch the field. They make you respect the entire width of the field because they have crazy speed at wide receiver, and they try to utilize that in a variety of ways. So, the new Oklahoma, if you will, with two receivers blocking as you throw those bubble screens, the jet sweeps, they're creative. They run a high-tempo offense. They demand a defense to be disciplined and play their assignments. And luckily for Georgia, I think that's one of their strengths is they're in the right position, they rely on one another, and they play very disciplined football.
So on Dog Nation Daily this morning, I made the case, you and I have done these shows together, and, people know what a Gator hater I am. And, I talked about the lead up to the Florida game as this idea that Dan Mullen was some sort of coaching mismatch, that he was going to, out-coach Kirby Smart. I said that the data just doesn't really back that up. As a defensive coordinator at Alabama, Kirby Smart had his way with Mullen for the most part, and he said, well, that's better overall talent. I'm talking about even in comparison to the Vegas point spread. Kirby Smart was even exceeding expectations there in that spot. And in some of those cases, those Mullen teams on paper weren't supposed to be so bad. 2014, number one briefly, for instance, but Kirby Smart did just fine. As a head coach, the last 2 years leading up to this season, Kirby Smart, for the most part, had his way with Dan Mullen. That I actually like the coaching matchup between Mullen and Smart. It is fair to point out, though, that the data for Mullen, I should say Smart and Malzahn, is a little bit different. 7 meetings with Kirby Smart since Malzahn's become a head coach. He scored 34 more points in 3 of those instances. So it's certainly not fair to say that Malzahn has frequently gotten the best of Kirby Smart, but he's certainly gotten a piece of him from time to time. So one way or another, Malzahn has found a way to score points against Alabama when Kirby was there. Certainly back here in 2017 at Jordan-Hare Stadium, Malzahn scored points in this spot that I think there is a misconception on the part of a lot of Georgia fans, in other words, that because statistically speaking, the Auburn offense has been, for the most part, not great up to this point in time. That's the Achilles heel and the way in which Georgia easily wins this game on Saturday. And I think that's overstating the situation, John.
Yeah, I think Malzahn's one of the more creative offensive minds in college football. I think he does a really good job of figuring out ways to get his skilled players the ball and put them in positions to succeed. So I think he's creative. I think he's a challenge. I also think that Georgia's defense now is much more disciplined in what they're doing and probably doesn't have the same issues. Now, for the teams that want to go big on big or go right into the teeth of the Georgia defenses in the past, that's not the way Malzahn has attacked Georgia, and I think that's probably why you see the statistical difference looking in retrospect.
We're going to go back over to YouTube, take some more comments there in a moment. Christopher Wilson brings up something I want to make sure we talk about. We addressed George Pickens before. Christopher says, B.A., do you think Pickens has a day or he lets his emotions get the best of him, and do y'all think that guys can handle all that? Here's what I'm going to say in defense of George Pickens because I know there is this thought of, and you see this, this is a guy that plays the game with a lot of intensity, and sometimes you worry about the intensity boiling over in a rivalry game. I think there's also another way to look at this. Pickens is a guy that I want in rivalry games because, John, you played, and I obviously won't ask you to mention any names, but there are some people that you may occasionally share a locker room with. They don't want it in a spot like this. It's too much pressure, too much intensity. Some guys are just more comfortable playing in games where there's a little bit less on the line. And there's a little bit, just when the overall temperature of the room is kind of dialed down a little bit. I think Pickens is the kind of guy that's not in any way intimidated by the crowd. He's not intimidated by the opponent. We think of mental toughness sometimes, how much composure you show, and Kirby Smart certainly bragged on his team this week for the composure it has shown thus far this season. But I believe that there's a level of mental toughness, mental fortitude in a game like this that's about more than just toughness. It's about wanting to be in the spot. The old thing we would say about wanting the ball in your hand with the game on the line. Pickens wants that. So from that standpoint, even if he's got a little bit of an edge with the way that he plays the game, there's a degree to which that edge helps you in a game like this.
Yeah, he's a gamer. He's a big-time gamer. He's a guy who plays with a lot of passion. I like that. I think you've seen from week one to now a progression and a maturation of George Pickens. Yeah, you saw some early emotion expressed in probably not the most healthiest of ways in week one and week two. And now what you see is a guy who's energized. He loves football. I want that guy on my team in those big moments. And Pickens is the guy he's asking for it. He's begging for it. Put me into that moment. I want to be on the big stage. I want you to count on me so I can prove you right.
So would you permit me to look ahead for like 1 second? Jacob Thompson, our YouTube comment section, says, assuming that Georgia wins on Saturday, as long as there are those 3 unbeaten teams, Georgia won't move past number 4. Let me go ahead and make my pitch right now. Georgia's currently ranked ahead of 2 unbeaten teams, Minnesota and Baylor. So the idea that Georgia can't be ranked ahead of any other unbeaten teams, that seems hard to understand given the fact that Georgia's ranked ahead of a Baylor team that's got 2 ranked wins, a Minnesota team that just beat Penn State. I want to make my pitch right now that if Georgia beats Auburn on Saturday, it'll be Georgia's third win against a team ranked in the top 25 right now of the playoff selection committee. Georgia should move ahead of Clemson right now just based on the absence of wins that Clemson has. The following week, Georgia will play the same team that right now stands as Clemson's best win. There's a reason why I'm making this case. Because if you're ahead of Clemson now and everybody wins out, it gives you a chance to be the number 1 overall seed where Georgia to go 12-1 and win the SEC, which means you could play your college football playoff semifinal game in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl. So these rankings right now matter from that standpoint. If Georgia beats Auburn, that's 3 wins better than what Clemson would have. I think there's an argument to be made that Georgia should move to number 3, and I think that's an argument that Georgia fans ought to pay attention to on the assumption that Georgia gets it done against Auburn.
That's why I love you, B.A. You pay attention to stuff like that, man. Here's what I would worry about for Georgia. Let's beat Auburn. Let's beat Texas A&M. Let's win against Georgia Tech. And let's shock the world in an SEC championship against, in my opinion, the team that's the best in college football right now. LSU has proven that they can play on a big stage. They can beat the top dog. They knocked off their nemesis and somebody who's considered them the stepbrother of the West in Alabama, and they look like they're playing complementary football. Great offense, great defense.
Let me give you a good comment. You're going to like this. Our buddy Bearded Dog on YouTube says, I don't just want Auburn to lose the game. I want them to lose their cell phones, their car keys, and their grandma's recipe for cornbread. That's one of the best comments that's one of the better comments we've had right there. It gives you an idea of the passion that exists for Georgia and Auburn on Saturday. Let's get a couple more YouTube comments while we're here. Devin Glenn thinks that Pickens definitely goes off on Saturday. Be nice to see. Terry Dunaway says, I think this is the game where we really figure everything out and play a complete game. Let me ask you about that, John, because Terry's comment in some form or fashion is quite representative of what I think a lot of fans feel like. And Fromm himself even said this on Saturday. He said, man, we're close. It's inches here, it's inches there. Do we as fans sometimes make too much of the idea of, man, it's all going to come together and this team's going to finally just really flex and show what it's all about, and what a great time to do that there at Auburn? Do we sometimes make too much of that? Because the commenter there We hear a version of that all the time of, hey, it's going to come together right now, and Georgia's going to show what it's all about.
I very rarely see that happen for a team, and I'm sorry to be the doomsday sayer for Georgia fans. I mean, I think Georgia does play complementary football. I think they slow the pace on offense, they control the ball, and they've got a suffocating defense that limits the number of points. What Georgia doesn't want to do is they don't want to press and cause turnovers and get behind. Well, the only loss, that's how it happened. It wasn't because I think they left their script at home and that they had 4 turnovers, a blocked field goal, and a missed field goal. That's how you beat Georgia, is in self-inflicted wounds. You create opportunities for them to turn the ball over. The complementary football is Georgia's not going to make some glaring mistake. They're going to control the ball. It's probably not going to be flashy or impressive statistically at the end of the day, but they control it, they don't turn it over, and they've got suffocating defense. That's how they play.
Sagapo Forever on YouTube says I seem tipsy. Listen, we are in a great spot. There are lots of craft cocktails and great beer selection and everything else, but I'm working. People always accuse me of this. Just because I'm happy, in a good mood, and ready for Auburn on Saturday, I can assure you that I'm high. I am high on life. That's what I am, high on life.
I'm high on being a Bulldog. I'm fired up that Georgia's in the conversation, and they've got a big game against an opponent that most of us do not like. I know more Auburn fans around us than any other team, with the exception of maybe Alabama. So if you can silence those folks that you have to work with, that you have to live with, that's a big thing for us, and there's plenty of Auburn folks. But I hadn't seen you take any drinks, B.A., so I can vouch for them.
Hey, before we get ready to sign this off, real quick question. You were a part of one of my great memories as a sports fan, and it happened in the stadium that Georgia's going to be back in on Saturday, that I'm going to be back in on Saturday, Jordan-Hare Stadium. I was lucky enough to be there in 2002 when you guys bounced back from a loss, stepped up, won the SEC East for the first time in Georgia history at that point, and that was a very big deal to have that go down that way. It's obviously a thrilling touchdown, your great friend David Green to Michael Johnson. Comeback, Auburn jumped out 14-0 there that day. Do you have fond memories of that? I mean, it's the kind of, I joke, there are a few moments in Georgia football history that if you're a part of them, they make paintings of you. You know, the touchdown David Green and Michael Johnson, they'll make a painting of that. How much do you remember playing in a big game like that, and how special is it to you to know that you were a part of one of the great wins in Georgia history?
That's arguably one of my favorite games that I've ever played, and I think you skipped one touchdown before Michael Johnson's catch in the end zone. You wouldn't happen to know who scored it, do you?
Did you get in the end zone?
Yeah, buddy. That's my only touchdown.
I did not know that. About John Stinchcomb scoring a touchdown in the Georgia-Auburn game in 2002. I don't remember that. I got to go back and look at that on YouTube.
Well, you have to check it out. And my brother still gives me crap over it because it's a quarterback draw. We're close to the end zone. David Green's supposed to run it in. Well, I'm playing left tackle. Defensive end rushes upfield. I don't even have to touch him. He ran himself out of the play, so I'm going to go block the safety. Well, I don't touch him, but I do see the ball laying in the end zone. So I jump on it, land on it, and I'm thinking, oh, crap, did he just score and flip it down? I just made a huge gaffe. But luckily it was a live ball, and I ended up scoring. But, yeah, that's a huge game in Georgia history, especially for that team in the Mark Richt era, because you win that game, you make it to the SEC championship, something that we hadn't done in quite some time, and it was a trajectory game for our program. So big game for us, and there was a couple passionate speeches given at halftime, so very, very memorable for us.
Listen, it's stories like that make the Marlows matchup so much fun each and every week. We do it live on video at 6 p.m., but every now and then we're lucky enough to be out at a Marlows location like we are tonight, the Marlows in Brookhaven. We got a big Q&A coming up where John will tell a lot more stories like that, and we'll talk a lot of Georgia football. So if you weren't able to be with us tonight, please make sure you come out and join us the next time we're at a Marlows location. We'll be at a tavern near you very, very soon. And if you can't do that, well, then just check out the one that's close to you. Big new menu, heading towards a fun holiday season. Boy, you want to talk about breaking bread and sharing some time with friends and family and those you care about? Marlo's Tavern is a great choice for that as we head towards the holiday season. Let me also say this, speaking of the holiday season, I know all of you always love to see the hover helmets on our desks here for the Marlo's matchup. That's a great holiday gift idea. If you go to hoverhelmets.com, and you can see the address there on your screen, hoverhelmets.com/DogNation, and then use the promo code DogNation, you can get 20% off your Hover Helmets order. This is a wonderful Christmas gift, wonderful holiday gift as you're getting ready for that. You see it spinning around, floating in midair here. We've got a basement or an office or something like that. The Hover Helmets is a great choice. Hoverhelmets.com for more on that. Hoverhelmets.com/DogNation. Then use the promo code DogNation. John, thanks so much for being here. Look forward to talking to you more about this. Obviously, your insight's been great, and I'm sure you're excited about seeing Georgia Auburn on Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to be a big battle. I can't wait to see these offensive and defensive lines slug it out. I know we didn't talk about it much, but Georgia's offensive line versus arguably the best defensive line in football, it's going to be quite the matchup.
I will see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily. We're getting ready for Georgia Auburn, and then throughout the day on Saturday from the Plains, we've got some fun business to take care of right now, though, as a part of our Marlo's matchup here at the Marlo's Brookhaven. So we'll do that and say we'll talk to you again sometime very soon.